At the end of January, the governor's budget recommendations were made public. In the budget, the town of North Attleboro is preliminarily slated to receive an additional $119,220 in Chapter 70 funding over what was received in fiscal year '24. The overall increase in funding represents the minimum aid increase that's guaranteed to all districts in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And this year, that minimum aid rate was initially set at $30 per student, which is multiplied by our foundation enrollment of 3,974 students. So just as a point of reference, in previous fiscal years, so in fiscal year '23 and '24, the legislature has set the minimum aid at $60 per student. So right now, the preliminary cherry sheet shows $30 per student, but historically over the past 2 fiscal years, that has increased to $60 per student. I think the important part about the process is the timing of the process, and how that aligns with our budget process here in North Attleboro. So generally when we start our process and when we're talking about the revenue that's going to come into the town, it's typically based on the governor's budget, which is the $30 per student minimum aid, but there is potential for that to increase.
Because last year, the governor came out with about a $21 million for North Attleboro, and it ended up being 21.2. So, I mean, and we didn't see a dime of that additional revenue. So, I mean, as we do this budget process, and that's just one example, that's $200,000 that was earmarked for education that didn't go to education. In 2023, it was about $123,000, and in 2022, it was $122,000. So, I mean, that's over a 3-year period, $488,000 that was legislated for increase that the town saw fit not to give us. I'm just going to call it what I see it. I feel like they've taken it. So, I mean, I don't know why we would build a budget off knowing that historically I could go in a 10-year arrears and find out that every single year this happens that, the finance committee or the town council or whoever's making these budgets is looking at, the worst case scenario, when the worst case scenario doesn't happen, and then they just take it and, the town's seeing record free cash. So, I mean, as we build our budget, I mean, I honestly don't accept that $21.4 million figure, and I don't think this committee should really accept it until it's closer, because we've seen historically that we're not going to see any increase.
We are working fast and furious with this building project. All of a sudden, Catherine and Ethan are on the building committee, and I see Catherine nodding her head. There's just so much going on. So as you all know, we have the owner's project manager who's been on board for several months. We got the designer on board, I guess a month ago or so, Doran Whittier. And boy, once that happened, that's when really the work began. And so they're currently doing sort of an assessment of our current state, of the building. And boy, over February vacation, there was a day where they had 16 people in the building, all different contractors and engineers and architects, and just to see them swarm the building and really start digging in, trying to learn more about our current space and what we have and don't have, and kind of to do that assessment. It's really important work, but it's really exciting. And then right now, internally and somewhat externally, we're doing a lot of what we refer to as visioning work. Right, so because we need to plan a new building, the actual physical building, but we also need to work together to try to figure out what education might look like over the next 50 years. And then simultaneously, we also have to write, it's a requirement of MSBA, it's something called an education plan. And it kind of ties, somewhat ties the vision into it, but we need to sort of lay out to the MSBA what our education program is going to look like in a new building. Right. That plan has to get ultimately approved by the school committee. Makes sense, right? So we've started that work. Michelle and Pete, Principal Haviland, are really leading that work.